The Road to Recovery. Emily's story of overcoming drug addiction. Emily never imagined she would become addicted to drugs. Her life, once filled with dreams and ambitions, took a detour that she hadn't anticipated. She grew up in a small town with a supportive family, excelled in school, and had a promising future ahead of her. But as often happens with addiction, the path to dependency is subtle, gradual, and by the time she realized the gravity of her situation, she was already deep into it. Emily's drug use started during her sophomore year of college. It wasn't anything extreme at first, just occasional recreational use at parties. She told herself it was harmless, just a way to blow off steam after a long week of classes and studying. Emily was always the responsible one in her group of friends, so it seemed impossible that she could lose control. But life was becoming more demanding. College was stressful, and Emily began to feel overwhelmed by the expectations she placed on herself. Her anxiety grew, as did the fear of failing. It started with pills, a little something to help her relax, to ease the pressure, and to give her the boost she needed to stay awake and finish assignments. Prescription medications provided by friends felt safe. After all, they were legal, right? At first it worked. She felt sharper, more focused, and more capable of handling the increasing load. But as the months passed, Emily began to rely on the pills more frequently. One pill turned into 2, then 3, and eventually the line between as needed and daily use disappeared. Before long, she needed the drugs not only to function academically, but also to keep her emotions in check. Anxiety, depression, and insecurity lurked just beneath the surface, but the pills kept them at bay, until they didn't. The real turning point came when Emily began mixing substances. Prescription pills were no longer enough to numb the growing emptiness she felt. Alcohol became her companion, a way to amplify the effects of the drugs and push down the emotional turmoil she tried so hard to ignore. On the outside, she maintained her image, good grades, friends, involvement in extracurricular activities, but inside, her life was spiraling out of control. Emily's addiction worsened after she graduated. The structure of college had kept her somewhat tethered to reality, but once she was out in the real world, everything unraveled quickly. She moved to a new city for a job that promised success and fulfillment, but instead, the pressure intensified. Alone in a city far from family and friends, Emily found solace in her growing dependence on drugs. Her work performance suffered. The confidence and capability she once had were buried under a fog of drug use. Missed deadlines, careless mistakes, and absenteeism became the norm. She alienated herself from her colleagues, friends, and eventually even her family, who had grown increasingly concerned. Emily avoided their calls, ashamed of the person she had become. The darkest moment came when Emily lost her job. She had shown up late to an important meeting, visibly disoriented and unable to focus. Her boss, once supportive and understanding, had no choice but to let her go. For Emily, this was rock bottom. Her career, something she had worked so hard for, was in shambles. The relationships she once held dear were fractured. She felt completely and utterly alone, and worse, she couldn't imagine life without the substances that had consumed her existence. But it was in that moment of despair that something inside Emily shifted. As she sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by empty bottles and pill containers, she realized that if she didn't change, she might not survive. The thought was sobering. She didn't want to die. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to admit that she had a problem she couldn't fix on her own. The road to recovery was anything but easy. The first steps were the hardest. Emily had to confront the reality of her addiction, something she had denied for so long. She started by telling her parents the truth, breaking down in tears as she confessed everything: the drugs, the job loss, the fear that she was no longer in control of her life. Their reaction was one of shock, but also love. They had suspected something was wrong for months, but never knew how deep her struggles had run. They offered their support, though they made it clear that recovery would be a long and difficult journey. In the beginning, withdrawal felt unbearable. Her body ached, her mind raced, and every cell in her body screamed for the substances she had relied on for years. But slowly, the fog began to lift. Emily learned to navigate the intense cravings and emotional upheavals. She found small victories in each day she remained clean, even though the process was fraught with relapses, moments of doubt, and overwhelming feelings of inadequacy. Emily's healing wasn't just physical, it was emotional and psychological as well. She had spent years using drugs to suppress her anxiety, her fear of failure, and her deep-seated insecurities. Now she had to face those feelings head-on. Therapy became an essential part of her recovery. Through it, she began to understand why she had turned to drugs in the first place. She uncovered patterns of perfectionism, self-criticism, and a fear of vulnerability that had driven her to seek escape. As time passed, Emily began to rebuild her life piece by piece. She reconnected with her family, who remained a steady source of support. Some friendships were lost along the way, but others were rekindled. Those who truly cared about her were willing to give her another chance. She found a new job, this time in a position that allowed her to prioritize her mental health and recovery without the overwhelming pressure that had previously contributed to her downfall. One of the most important lessons Emily learned in her recovery was that healing isn't linear. There were days when the urge to use resurfaced, when the weight of her past mistakes felt unbearable. But she had developed tools to cope. She learned to reach out for support instead of retreating into isolation. She learned to take care of her body and mind through exercise, meditation, and honest conversations with those she trusted. She also learned to forgive herself, which may have been the hardest part of all. Today, Emily considers herself in recovery, not recovered. She knows that addiction is a lifelong battle, but it's one she's willing to fight. Each day brings new challenges, but it also brings new opportunities for growth, healing, and self-discovery. Her journey isn't defined by her past addiction, but by her resilience and the strength it took to reclaim her life. Emily's story is a testament to the power of perseverance and self-compassion. Recovery isn't easy, and it doesn't happen overnight. But for those who are willing to confront their demons and put in the work, there is hope. Emily found her way out of the darkness, and she now looks forward to a future where her past no longer controls her. If you are suffering with the same drug addiction problem, you can reach out to us. We will help you to get out from this problem. Our contact number is available in the video description. Feel free to contact us now.